Hi there, it's Marcus here. I'm going to talk to you about governance in the context of multiple futures. Alternatives matter, and there are many ways in which we can access these, foster these in our own lives, in our own works, and also at a governance level where rather than focusing on closed short-term goals, we work across the spectrum of temporalities from the immediate through to the long term. We touched on some of this last week in the lecture that I gave for you all, and in this one I want to basically drop a whole bunch of stuff on you, in a sense, in order to, I guess, get you curious, but also to encourage you to experiment. When dealing with uncertainty and open-ended social, economic, environmental context, there is no one answer. We're all in it, up to our neck, and we need to, each of us, harness our own individual skills, creativity, passion, love. Love is very important for planet, people, and so on. So let me leap into the lecture for you, and I'll see you at the other end, so to speak. So, alternatives and why they matter. Yes. So I want to talk about open futures. Open futures are the best way, I think, to, I guess, feel our way forward, okay? We don't want closed futures. Closed futures are usually somebody else's future for a start, but open futures make us uncomfortable. However, they are necessary when a given future is seen as the only future, and that given future is nearly always, as I've said, somebody else's. Hegemonic power, I love that word, thank you Gramsci, you smarty pants from the beginning of the 20th century. Hegemonic power colonizes our imaginations, fills the future with a single possible legitimate social expression. Okay? Governance work needs to deal with this uncertainty, as this allows for resilience in the face of complexity and vulnerability. So governance work needs to move us away from hegemonic power, single silver bullet type solution thinking, to dealing with complexity, working with immediate needs, but with that one eye at least on longer term concerns, visions, goals. We need to include many voices and perspectives to generate a tolerance for difference and tension. I long ago got drawn towards the intercivilizational dialogue work of people like Fred Delmer. There's a book of his called Intercivilizational Dialogue. And, you know, it's a really powerful way to start training ourselves to hear, see, and feel differently. To understand that all our languages shape our consciousness, our language practices, writing a report, for instance, in that generic sense that good old ChatGPT or Claude can knock out beautiful reports for us, but do they stretch us? Do they actually function at that poetic level that I left off thinking about policy poets at the end of the last lecture, for instance? And my sense is that most reports, most policy document writing doesn't. But when you find one that does, it's magic. It's absolute magic. But we need to include many voices. We must also acknowledge and engage with our internal voices. This came up in our discussions following the lecture, didn't it? So our internal voices, internal governance is essential here. Do we actually have an internal voice that dominates, suppresses, disallows, and bullies even our other selves? I think this is something that we need to think about. The work of Hal and Sidra Stone on voice dialogue is really important here. And again, I'm dropping another text, the name of another text for your voice dialogue work, about 1989 it came out, but it's still a very powerful way of understanding the way ourselves are constructed and the power that they, often coercive power, that they can exert over our thinking and consciousness. So Take an example then of, I think, good report writing, really thoughtful. From the United Nations, the Futures Thinking and Strategic Foresight in Action, that it's just a 2025 document that came out, and they noted that leadership, collaboration, context, inclusive participation, systemic foresight, capacity, and evidence-based adaptation are all key features of engaging with futures and the futures thinking, I guess, but I would say futures practices. And also, for me, it's becoming increasingly important to acknowledge our futures feelings. How do we feel, and how does feeling shape consciousness, shape our rationalities themselves? So, taken from the report, short little comment, but I think it's really important. Many Indigenous practices have long embodied long-term thinking, drawing on worldviews that reflect principles of natural cycles, reciprocity with ecosystems, and intergenerational responsibility. While referred to using different names, they share a similar intent to that of strategic foresight, which is to anticipate future possibilities and ensure the resilience and well-being of future generations, underpinned by a holistic, that means more than human, doesn't it, understanding of sustainability. Well, it does in my book anyway, and I'm reading from my book, aren't I? So, talking about books, wonderful little book from Sarah Davanzo on the alchemical and futures thinking. She's a very creative American futurist, and she produced this lovely little book that you can only buy from her own website if you're interested, but you'll find it, and it's also, I put up the interview I did with her, so you've got all the stuff there. But she gives us this, and we played with this matrix, didn't we, last time? So let's have a look at it. So, which is your dominant curiosity mode? So she's broken these modes down into feeling, doing, seeing, and thinking, okay? And you know, I've probably at different times inhabited all four of those quadrants, but as I've just flagged, its futures feeling is very important to me now. But what are her coordinates? Active risk-taking is at the top, passive risk avoidance is at the bottom. She's got logical, instinctive and fast system 1, and logical slow system 2. So she's got these as her coordinates, and she offers us context that maps, questions that disrupt, search for tools, and I'm going to give you a whole bunch of little tools that I've been using over the years. Apply those tools, do them, try them out. What do you observe? That's the seeing coming through. Tentative conclusions, thinking about it. And then you look again. In a sense, this is a form of action research, which we also talked about in our session last week, didn't we? So we moved from feeling. What's it feel like to be there? We come up with some doing things that test, we apply tools, see what happens. We see what happens, I just used the word, didn't I? And then we think about it. So, and of course it goes round and round. So, just one point here, legacy. I think to understand that the past is folded into the present and shapes our futures is really important. That's why I wrote that little paper, Navigating the Ruins of the Future. So, Roman Krishnarik, I think he's terrific. As you know, he wrote this book, The Good Ancestors, and the next couple of slides touch on this. He said, look, we're inheritors of gifts from the past. Consider the immense legacy left by our ancestors. Those who sowed the first seeds in Mesopotamia 10,000 years ago, who cleared the land, built the waterways and founded the cities where we now live, who made the scientific discoveries, won the political struggles, and created the great works of art that have been passed down to us. We seldom stop to think about how they have transformed our lives. We are living in futures that they possibly, especially if you go back to Mesopotamia, never imagined. Okay, but even go back a few hundred years, and I think our ancestors would be totally shocked. But we still have that legacy. And that legacy should support us intellectually, emotionally, morally, ethically, culturally, aesthetically, and also personally. If you've ever walked around, and you're guys mostly in Europe, so you've probably walked around a nice cathedral like this one, There's that lovely cathedral, the twin-towered cathedral in Uppsala, for instance. Beautiful places, beautiful, I think a beautiful messaging of cultural aspirations, what matters. So, temporality, again, I talked about the short term, quick shows, stock markets, public auctions, public life, personal life. So this is a little image taken straight from Krishnarik's book, okay, the first one. He's written a new one, which I think is beautiful, called History for Tomorrow, Inspiration for the Past. Okay, so from the past, sorry. And I think, those sorts of, he understands that what many of us need right now is some good news, but also simple, clear language around things that will help us think and feel our way out of the dominant problems that we face. So he's about bringing together data, let's say historical data for that second book, conceptual data, that the way he's structured the tug of war between business as usual and aspirational futures, which was a slide from the last lecture. He's giving us tools for thinking, and that's really what we need. We need tools for thinking, and that thinking should then flow into the doing, which is what Sarah Davanzo was talking about. So let's play with a triangle. I love this triangle, and I'm going to use it with you briefly in a moment. But first of all, let's think about management that is potentially transformative. So we've got the imagination is a tool for both understanding and also creating. Curiosity is an invitation to explore, play, test, and reconfigure. So what we have here, we have actors using a disruptive imagination. The Me Too movement, the No Kings movement, both of which were recently unleashed upon the American social fields, okay? Then we have managerialists using a bureaucratic imagination who say, look, this is all well and good, this activist stuff, but we have to make it work. So the bureaucratic imagination is looking at the systems that we've inherited, so the legacy systems, but also they should rush off and have a quick chat with the policy poets, the poets who use a moral imagination to think about and enact and generate new possibilities within the bureaucratic context. Institutions are essential. We can't live without them, but I tell you what, most of the time we forget that we created them, and we go around as though they can create us. It's actually obviously a folded and dialogical context. So then what do we have in the centre here? Emergence of what I'm calling, very funnily, the futures pheromones. I like that, futures pheromones. Think about the role of language in this process. I'm using this word pheromone. We know pheromones are not normally used in a cultural context. How much are we prisoners of the word? I want you to think about that, because we're going to wrestle with some of that when you and I catch up in our next session. Continuing to work with that triangle, I'm now turning to Suhail Inayatullah's work. He generated, with a whole bunch of people, particularly Ivana Milojevic, the Futures Triangle. And I can see that I've forgotten to reference it here, but I will throw a reference under the slide for you to access later. So, first of all, a note on the pheromone. What is a pheromone? Well, I took this straight off Wikipedia. A pheromone, from the ancient Greek phero, to bear, and hormone, okay, which is a chemical that is secreted or excreted by an organism, which triggers a social response in members of the same species. So a pheromone, of course, we can have pheromones of fear and desire and longing and so on. Obviously sexual pheromones, when you meet the man or woman of your dreams and got bowled over, only to discover later that they were just using some very clever musky sort of smell. But no, I'm being a bit cynical and a bit cheeky here. But I think you get my meaning. But to me, futures pheromones are important. If we can understand that culturally we are called to be in the world, we are called as human beings to be social. We are socialized to be social. We are, in fact, wired to be social. And the pheromones that shape our lives, and they do very much shape our lives, are equally linked to cultural context of practice. We practice being human, okay, and it's a tough job. So what are we faced with? The Futures Triangle seeks to help us map out the context by saying, look, guys, we're sitting down here, we're looking at the future of healthcare or something like that. What are the pressures that we're facing today? The push of the present. Okay, but the manager will say, but yeah, we've already got a system and it's deeply flawed. Yeah, we know it, but we still are committed to making it work. What are the weights of the past that bear upon us, that shape our rationality, our language around this, and also the social institutional processes that seem to be immovable, okay? And then what's calling us? What's calling us into the future? That's the function of the pheromone, the future's pheromone. And, you know, to me, it's a really great and very simple tool. You can run out tomorrow and try this on your friends, your family, your community, or you can try it in a workshop, in a business or, you know, a workshop of a governance nature. It really does help us because you say collectively, tell us what are the issues that we're facing now. Okay, not enough money, not enough doctors, not enough nurses. You know, the rise, and this is the activists kicking in here, the rise of anti-vaxxers or whatever it might be. So these are the pushes on the present, okay, but also fiscal conditions, the politics and social and religious and ethical issues all around the present. But what about the past? Well, the past is, well, we've got hospitals. They look like something we recognise. We've got nurses and doctors. Doctors are people whom we actually, most of us, will give all our authority over to and will do what they say. Or maybe if you're an activist and an anti-vaxxer, you'll say, well, they're a bunch of witch doctors and we're not going to go near them. Both of them have a tradition. Both of them have a past. Both positions do. And we can throw up a whole bunch of points here for the past. And then for the future, what's calling us? A global health crisis, a pandemic like COVID has hit us and made us totally rethink aspects of the, I guess, the social contract in a sense. Okay, so many things happening. We want to live long, healthy lives. We want to see, you know, disease and poverty eradicated around the planet and all the rest. These are all things that call to us and actually activate the moral imagination. So then, governance is a practice art. I ask you to have a read of Aksiniya Starr's great piece on India and the EU. And she offers us a civilizational picture, a take on this. And she makes a couple of points that I thought were worth citing here. India learned decades ago that in a civilizational union, that's Europe and India, both two civilizations from very different histories, nobody gets everything. And the art is making that sustainable. Europe is still learning this lesson painfully, as internal tensions reveal. So Europe comes from, you know, its cultures, French, German, Romanian, Ukrainian, and so on. Well, the Brits were there, but then they pressed the eject button. I think they're regretting it now. But, you know, Europe is working towards trying to negotiate a space where various contested interests, languages, cultures, aspirations are sought to be reconciled in some way. India, which is more populous than Europe and has huge linguistic and cultural states within it. Karnataka is not the same as Tamil Nadu, for instance, and Bengal. They all have different languages, different histories, different cultures, but India has managed reasonably well. Sure, it has some rather dark tendencies in terms of the use of violence, for instance, and the Modi government in some ways would make all of us shake our head. But at the same time, India over the last 70 years since it was made I guess, an independent nation state and entered the world stage as an independent nation state back in 1947, okay, it has done reasonably well. The India-EU agreement, continues Starr, resembles a bridge being built. I underline that because it's really important that futures work involves bridge building, okay, simultaneously from both sides. And I've written an article on that, which I will share with you. Each party brings its own engineering logic. That means its own cultural logic, its own social engineering. How do we solve these problems? But the structure will only hold if both adapt to the same challenging landscape. So when you take the big picture that Starr is taking here, we get a new angle on the whole thing. And so governance becomes something that involves deep reflection on our own cultures, our own civilizational orientations and priorities, and a willingness. This is where Johann Galton's work comes in on Transcend, a willingness to allow possibilities to emerge. This is where alternatives come in. So, this is where I want to wave the future senses flag just a little bit, because I think when we're looking at, let's say, India and Europe, the first tool is memory. These are future senses that our culture instills in us, not just identity, but tools for navigating our world. These tools I think of as senses. That's my word for them, because it makes sense, because we are sense-making beings. We create logics and narratives and so on to justify, rationalize, understand, and perhaps seek even to manage and control through language. So what's the first tool? Well, I'm a historian by training, and I teach history at my university. The first tool is memory. This is our data set. Everything that sits behind us, okay, is in culture. And that database, okay, it sets the limits for what we can imagine and aspire to. Okay, that's important first. And of course, when we start looking to the future, we draw on memory. It's the only data set we've got. Memory informs imagination, okay? And that's why the work of Roman Krishnarik is just one example of many, with his History for Tomorrow, his Good Ancestors and so on. He's drawing on collective cultural memories and associations and so on in order to empower foresight, to enrich imagination, that kind of imagineering work that I like to talk about. So memory, helps us informs our anticipation, our plan, our strategy, and our imagination. And of course, when we're doing that, it's not broad cultures that are doing it. Each one of us as individuals does it. And that's where voice comes in, our sense of what we can achieve given our context in the world, which is determined by memory and foresight. And the fourth sense is optimism. Okay, now optimism, as we talked a bit about it when I was with you last, is that hopefulness. Hope is a verb. We must practice it. So the extent to which we feel we have a voice, that we can make a difference, and this is where wonderful episodes like the podcast series Screw This come in. Those people started off disempowered and fed up. Basically, they were being done over by everybody, and slowly but surely, through different very local, very you could say intimate shifts in consciousness and social practice, they regained their strength, their social voice, and that feeds their optimism. And finally, the fifth sense is yearning, the calling of life for more life, a kind of existential or spiritual itch that calls us forward. And of course, that's pretty much where the future's pheromone sits. What is our best future that we could imagine? Okay, a future where there's security, but we have a level of personal freedom and a society that values alternatives and difference and celebrates imagination and creativity over functional industrial production and technocratic management. Oh, okay, you get my view. Okay, next one. So I'm jumping back to Sarah Davanzo's work. She came up with a periodic table. Some of you might recognize this, but no, it's not a periodic table of the atomic weight of materials. It's about curiosity. And these are called the elements, so that's a pun on the periodic table, of insight discovery. You can pore over that. I'm not going to obviously walk you through it now. It's way too complex. It'll be an entire 2-hour session at least, if not longer. But it is beautiful. It comes from that little book of hers, which I thoroughly recommend. It's just great. But you've got curiosity, you've got character, you've got suppositions, competencies. These are the skills that we need. And we have transformations. And then down the bottom, assassinations. These will quickly extinguish insight like water on fire. The superficial, stress, structure, and surety. Oh, I know all the answers, okay? Inspirations, foresight, crowd sight, zeitgeist, sorry, I often say that wrong, outsight, whole sight, and meta sight. So I just love this framework. I'm going to let you play with it for now. But I want to shift a little bit, slow down maybe, take a bit of a breath, and go to Bangladesh, West Bengal, East Bengal. And here is something that I think is really special. It's a photograph by a Bangladeshi photographer. Name's gone straight out of my head right now, but I'll put it down underneath the slide. Okay, and it's about creating spaces to dream. He lives in Dhaka, and he heard about a class of school kids, probably year 9 or 10, so that would make them 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, and they were given an assignment by their teacher, well-intentioned teacher I think, but also quite unrealistic. The teacher asked them, it was an not English language class or imagining class or social science class or something, to go and spend a few hours in nature, to find a park somewhere and sit. But Dhaka is one of the most intensely urban places on the planet. This girl went home and said, "Mum, I'm supposed to do this." And Mum was a genius. That's the mum there with her daughter. The mum said, "I know what to do." She went and got this blanket that she had, a cover for the bed, and she hung it up like this. And she took her daughter up onto the roof. They laid out a little picnic, and they did quiet nature type things, probably with a bunch of crows cawing in the distance, or not so distant either for that matter. I've been in Calcutta quite a few times, very similar to Dhaka in many ways. And, I know that the black crows love that. But to me, that's creating a space to dream. And this is where my shift comes in some respects. But, I'll keep coming back to this, and I've got some tools for doing this. So then where are we going with this? Well, if you're going to bring futures into governance work, you need to understand that the best governance is collaborative. So we need to think about democratizing the future, giving people access to the future, even if it's the access of this mother giving her daughter access to the natural world through an artifice. But artifice for the human mind and imagination has strong emotional implications for us anyway. So, a few points I want to make. A relational approach to futures aims to give the future back to all stakeholders. Now, I want you to consider what all stakeholders might refer to. Is it all us rich middle class people? Is it all people in Europe? Is it all people on the planet? Is it the more than human world, and so on? Okay, I think you know where I'm going, but I'm not going to put words into your mouth. It's also an ethic of inclusion. It democratizes decision-making, responsibility, and access. And it sees across scales who is not in the room, it asks. And that's a very important question. And it sees across scales as to who is not in the room, but it also sees across scales, when you think about it, as to the scales of the personal, the local. So that's the screw this type scale. A local community, individuals in the community decide to do something about their situation, and it moves out from there. I think the world is made up with one dream and one worry at a time, from every individual on the planet, and of course from the more than individual to the more than human. So Frank Spencer is a great futurist, works out of America. There's a link to this particular blog post that he made, and I grabbed it because it speaks really well and it sums up the work of Vanessa Machado de Oliveira, who also works under the title of Vanessa Andreotti, whose name is there. But I want to give you this because when we think about it, our world is changing quickly and in ways that we can't anticipate. It's changing in ways that are dangerous for people and planet. So there's growing levels of risk, existential risk, you might say, but also truly physical risk as well. But that's because the world that, especially my generation, I'm in my 60s now, but this world that we've inherited, that you've all been born into, has been built on certain suppositions, premises about how things work, and those things are breaking down. So hospicing is what we do when somebody is sick and dying on their deathbed. We look after them, we hold their hand, we tell them that we love them, and we give them whatever medical care they need. Yeah, okay. We can do that for the planet as well. Or maybe it's not so much for the planet as for the civilization, this globalized civilization that has now really affected every aspect of planetary performance function. So let's have a look. In the end, Frank says, or I'm calling him Frank because I know him, truly impactful foresight and futures thinking requires the willingness to facilitate the death and burial of that dominant narrative, an embrace of cooperative connection for evolutionary transition, a perception of emerging realities over in-system trends, a universal and symbiotic view of large-scale processes over object orientation, a co-creative embrace of transformation over the future-proofing of our static world, and a deep change in our hearts, minds, and souls. If Andreotti, that's Vanessa Andreotti, Hospicing Modernity, a wonderful book, is right in saying that we need to hospice modernity, then we will certainly need to also hospice futurity. In other words, the futures that modernism have sown are going to fail. They are distinctly threadbare, fragile, and topsy-turvy. So we're going to need to also hospice futurity to end the corruption of the dominant system and allow for the birth of emergent systems of transformation and a futures thinking and foresight practice that no longer services the machine of a colonial world. So Frank has long argued that much of our futures thinking and much of our foresight has been shackled to ethics and morals and worldviews, or a worldview, particularly the modernist worldview, that seeks to manage, control, reduce risk, minimize opportunity, and so on, in a rather anthropocentric, that's human-centered, and also Eurocentric, or Americo-Eurocentric, or West-centric, Occidental-centric, trying to think of all the other words I might call that, way of seeing the world. So he's arguing for a much more nature-based approach. And if you go and check out his website, and there's the link, you will find a rich corpus of work that may inspire you. So I want to shift again a little bit, okay, to talk about some things that you might want to do. In exploring the future, you might want to do some photo voice activity. This is where you go out with your iPhone or cell phone, whatever it is, or a decent camera, and you take photographs and you record your thoughts about that. Which photographs might point you towards the future, a future that you desire or a future you want to avoid? Which photographs might speak of the past? Which photographs might speak of the present? You might be sitting with one of your children, or a niece or nephew, and you've got a photograph of you holding. That's you in the present. But knowing that that niece and nephew are going to have to grow up and spend, the bulk of their lives in this 21st century dealing with all those things. Photo voice activities are also activities that you can share with others. You might, 5 or 6 of you who know one another in this course might say, let's all do a photo voice activity and share our photographs on Google Drive or wherever, and create a collage of photographs relating to the future, perhaps aspirational futures Or perhaps it's also looking at the future sense of memory, things that elicit memory. Our species is highly nostalgic. We are very aware of elements from the past that inform our identity. But then you could also play with a yearning song list, a song playlist. I did this with a bunch of Ukrainian therapists last year, and it was really touching. But it was also very important because the level of struggle, difficulty, trauma, whatever you want to call it, that they're facing at the moment is immense. And songs, particularly songs that reference cultural points, old songs, new songs, songs of resistance and revolution and rebellion, songs of hope and aspiration, tearful songs, and so on. You could create a yearning song list. That might be a fun one to do using Spotify or whatever it is that you use. But, another thing, I'm going to talk a bit more about this one, is establishing your future sanctuary. You may remember that I said that I'm running a future sanctuary online at the moment where people, a lot of the people actually from Europe, people who've done this course in years past, for instance, are there, and a whole bunch of others who know nothing about this course are there as well. But, a future sanctuary is a place where we can feel safe to dream, but we can also practice our future skills, our future's voice, the voice that synthesizes memory and foresight, for instance, so that we can grow our optimism and also respond in meaningful, heartfelt, caring ways to our yearning, the future's pheromone. So, making a space to dream, a sacred space to become. So I've got the candle there, because to me candles always evoke that sense of time to go in. I've been meditating for decades now, twice a day, and it's absolutely a core practice for me. But however you do it can be different. It doesn't have to be meditation, but a candle does evoke that in me. A candle in a church, and so on as well. So, a sacred space. These can be in your home, a place for sitting, being still, meditating with a candle or a soft piece of music. It can be outside, by water or under a tree, or in a forest, or on a mountain, by the sea. I could have put there as well. Many of my friends, because I live on the Sunshine Coast, they are surfers and so on. I have failed miserably at being a surfer. I'm way too white. I get sunburned terribly. But anyway, I do love going to the ocean, but that would be me early morning or late evening. Sometimes a sacred space can also be found in the group of like-minded souls. That's what I'm hosting online, for instance. And of course, you guys are all welcome if you chose to join us. You can have many places where the future sanctuary can be found and entered. Okay, I've often describe it as this inner garden that we have, that we've used to live and play in and everything as children. And then by the age of 7, 8, 9, 10, it's pretty much been burgled, invaded by the outside utilitarian world of education and social function. And we often forget that we have this, what I call a secret garden. It's a soulful place, a soul place. It's somewhere inside us, okay? This is a special practice and it needs regular repetition. I put in brackets, ritual. We need to ritualize things that are sacred. We need to ritualize things that build better futures for ourselves. I note that we are all pilgrims in life and we are all called to establish our future sanctuary. Whether we can do it on our own or whether we do it with friends, family, and so on, and ancestors too, and future generations. We live in folded time. So when there is a need for the inner work, you can look at CLA of self. We did CLA last time that we met, the first time we met with Ulrika. So we can do a CLA of self. Marguerite Westerkopp's article, that's a link there, is a brilliant example of that. We can foster new stories and find new metaphors. Futures pheromones work for me. We can engage in wayfinding and purpose, what Ramakrishna calls the transcendent goals that frame life and give us meaning, and we can also look at the way meaning and that quest for meaning and wayfinding inform ethical alignment across scales, from the local, from the personal, the intimate, and even the internal, of course, with us, with our multiple voices, to the what you might call the cosmic, that meta layer. So I'm just an evocative image here of future sanctuaries. Think about it. And also another evocative image, performing futures rituals. What might be a futures ritual for you? Think about that. How would you ritualize your relationship with the future? This is an embodied practice. It's not something you can do and leave your body over there. A futures ritual involves you doing something. It might be going for a walk in the morning, every morning, okay? Whether it's snowing, raining, or storming, or just a beautiful sunny morning. It could involve a gathering with people that you somehow celebrate. It doesn't have to be ritual. It doesn't even have to be, new agey spiritual. All of that's fine. I'm very open to the function of religions in cultures. I'm also, however, highly suspicious because, of course, one of the things we all want to do is to give away our own responsibility. And I think religions can encourage us to do that so that people can then tell us what to do. But at the same time, my life is drenched in religious symbolism and the metaphors, the aesthetics, and so on. That's why I like my candle, isn't it? Okay. We also have friends, futures friends. Our communities of practice. Who do we have fun and play with? And that might be having fun and play on your own. I play the classical guitar, and as a soloist pretty much, and that is my fun and play as much as anything else. I also live in the wilderness. I can hear the bats squawking outside right now, so time in nature is important. Now, I want you to do this. Let's have a quick think about this. Here's a little task for you. Take a breath. We've only got a few more slides to go. Narrative. Okay, now the question I think really we all need to think deeply about is, whose story are we living? How much is it really your story? I want you to sit and reflect on your life choices. What pressures and conditions shape these? Parental, friends, expectations from society, a desire to succeed academically or professionally, whatever. How do you experience desire? In other words, what were you longing for? What were you yearning for? And also the desire for recognition, social acceptance, and so on, may come at the cost for your desire to feel at home in the natural world, or to feel truly loved by yourself before anybody else, of course. And then maybe you're truly loved by a life partner, or maybe you'd like your kids to love you again. Maybe you bungled being a parent for a while. Who knows? But how do you experience desire is really important. And a lot of work of the particularly the European continental philosophers in the second half of the 20th century focused on the role of desire in shaping capitalism, consumerism, and so on, but also in shaping consciousness. Then I'd like you to have a crack at this. I know he's going to ask me to write a poem, do you say? Write a poem, okay? Or do a drawing, or a dance, and maybe a song, or all of them together. Do that and see what emerges, because it's now you looking inward to yourself. And we'll discuss some of this, of course, when we meet. Another one. So I'm asking you to become an imagination activist, really, to trigger things in your imagination through the use of the imagination. It's not just in the imagination. The imagination is something we do. We imagine things. We inhabit imaginaries. Yuval Harari, who wrote that terrific book, Sapiens, talks about us living within imagined orders. The worlds that we inhabit are just given. They are socially constructed, cultural, sense-making theatre almost. And what we can see is, and in the way people like Netanyahu or Trump or people like that across the planet are seeking to strut and bellow and perform outrageously on the stage of our world media and so on. But it's also on the stage of our consciousness. How do we react to that? I talk about Imagineering, and there's a little link there to Imagineering. And you can go and have a listen to that. That was just a few weeks ago that I gave that talk. I was in discussion with Anish Abdullah, who works at Tamkang University and is the chief managing editor at the moment of the Journal of Future Studies. So, another thing to have a look at. Futures feelings. Now, I told you that I've been moving towards feelings, so futures feelings to me are important. I'd like you to list 10 words that arise in you when you think of the future 20 years from now. Take some colour pencils and markers and put a colour over each word. Some might be red or yellow, green, blue. That's why I've got all those pencils there, of course. Then choose one word and write a paragraph about it. Share this with the group. What emerges for you? If you could do this for me, this would be a great breakout room activity when we gather. The poem and dance might be as well, but dancing, if you did a dance, might be hard to do in a breakout room to the same extent at least. And then I want you to start taking the bull by the horns. Futures actions themselves are important, okay? I would suggest that you, or as an individual, a family or a group, okay, can adopt a tree, adopt a street, adopt a river, adopt a bird form or an insect, whatever it is, and care. You care. You start paying attention to that which you've adopted. You bring it into your family in some way. I'd like you to also make a list of 5 strengths that you feel are unique to you. I mean, of course, they might be shared by everybody else on the planet, who knows? But I mean, you can feel that you really do care, that you are great at offering either material support or emotional support to others. Or maybe you're really good at working imaginatively with institutions so that their impact is for the better rather than for the worse. Okay? Make a good things list. Just what's good? What are the things that are happening at the local, national, or global level that you notice? It's too easy, way too easy, to focus on the negatives. The reason why I go for podcasts like Screw This, On Being, Forest of Thought with a local woman she lives on the Norwegian-Swedish border, Ingrid Reisa. I listen to those things because they give me good news. Okay, do some Imagineering. Play with timelines, for instance. Check out the reading Deep on Deep Listening from Marilyn Melman. She's a fabulous futures elder, Imagineer, lives in Stockholm. Well worth going and visiting and talking to. She's always looking for people to do internships with her as well. If you want to contact Marilyn, contact me, and I will put you in touch with her. Terrific person. And you can find it in a book in part 1, chapter 8. Or you can just go and plant a tree. Maybe think and place a message under it, or whisper a message into its leaves, or whatever. Okay? So these are kinds of things. These are small actions that we can all do. And of course there are many other actions. Go for a walk in a forest. Go and visit a sick elderly friend or relative. That reading from Marilyn Melman comes from this. I think we have to collect resources. Resourcing is really important. Julia Benz is fantastic. She leads projects all the time. She's just been leading another project on sustainability as well, where she's going to produce, apart from anything else, these are free to download. I saw that she posted the other day that more than 40,000 copies of this book have been downloaded in the last 12 months. Great book. Go and download it and get excited with all the juicy things in there. And second last slide, futures and yearning. I want to come back to that. And this is me quoting myself because I can be eloquent sometimes, at least. This is at the very towards the end of a little book that I produced last year. If you want it, I can send you a PDF of it. But I send it to people who actually ask for it, because it takes it one step further. You actually have to reach out and say, please, can I have a copy of your book? And I'll send you the PDF. If you want a hard copy, it'll cost you, because I have to post it and all that sort of stuff, but the PDF is free. So one of the thoughts I had at the very end of this book is the following. Love is our birthright. We yearn to be loved and to give love. This yearning calls us into the world. That's the future sense, right? The struggles we face in life are invitations to outlove the experiences and challenges that seek to deprive us of our birthright. Can we outlove this moment where all hell seems to be breaking loose in many parts of the world? The future, that space of potential, is a powerful commitment from space-time reality to the possibilities of love. It emits this rich, sweet pheromone of love, one that calls us to action and also holds us to account. Love is a self-organizing principle. We've got to remember that. It organizes the world in ways that we often don't even notice. Can we love ourselves, other, and planet? Can we move towards relationship rather than hide from its vulnerabilities? Okay, so that's what I want you to really think about. And I'm going to turn to something slightly comical at the end. Good old the Pirates of the Caribbean. And here he is, the captain holding the compass, right? What does that compass do? If you've seen the movie, you'll know what that compass does. The compass points not north, south, east, and west. It points to what one is desiring, what one is called for, what one is yearning for. And that is a key to understanding wayfinding as a way of navigating governance, our personal lives, as well as our collectives. And I hope this was a useful little diversion for your week, okay? And you can see it's got darker outside. I look forward to catching up with you all. It was great having, I guess, us work our way through the challenges of thinking proactively about governance rather than managerialist governance is, for me, key to opening up the future for people and planet. Anyway, that's me right now. I will see you later. Take care, have a good week, and all of that.